Packers Fan Podcast, postseason listener feedback, episode 79 coming up next.
Hey, Packers fans, these are the podcasters you're looking for. One of these guys bought his car on eBay and had to fly one way to Kansas to pick it up and drive it home. And the other guy has a shrine of Gus Johnson next to his podcast microphone. Together, Wayne Henderson and Dallin Christensen are glad to bring you another episode of the Packers Fan Podcast.
Thanks for joining us on the unofficial Packers Fan Podcast, the show by and for fans of your 13-time NFL champion Green Bay Packers. Websites at PackersFanPodcast.com. And on this 79th episode, let me tell you two things we're not going to do. First off, we're not going to just sit around and commiserate with our loss and wallow in depression about the Packers season. At the same time, we're not going to just sit here with rosy cheeks saying, oh, well, there's always next year. Okay? You can help support the Packers Fan Podcast by doing all of your Amazon shopping at PackersFanPodcast.com using the Amazon affiliate link there. And the Packers Fan Podcast, proud to be part of the SPNT.TV Sports Podcast Network. And me, I'm at Wayne Henderson, the voice acting, podcasting, getting over the grieving process, Green Bay Packers fan.
And I'm Dallin Christensen, and I'm still trying to process this.
Just right up front, in my opinion, I think this was one of the toughest losses to take since losing to John Elway in the Super Bowl.
That's exactly the game I was thinking about as well. But to be honest, I think this one might have even been a little bit tougher because with the Super Bowl game with Elway, obviously the Green Bay was going for back-to-back Super Bowls. That game, Green Bay pretty much played terribly, and the Broncos played a perfect game. And that was about the only way that I think Denver could have beaten Green Bay in that situation, and it happened. The first thing I thought of when this game was over was, this is how the Red Sox must have felt in '86 when the ball went through Buckner's legs, or when Calvin Schiraldi threw the wild pitch to allow the tying run to score when Boston was a strike away from its first World Series win in, who knows, I think at that point it was 69 years, and it still took them another 18 years after that to win a World Series. But I've been a Green Bay fan a long time. I'm 39. I've probably been a Green Bay fan 35 of those years, roughly speaking, give or take.
Excellent.
This one is as tough of a loss, as much of a gut punch of a loss as I've ever experienced.
That seems to be the general consensus, and it is what it is. We've got a lot of listener feedback on all different sides of the issue. So just kind of to set the table, Dallin, why don't we start it right off with listener feedback from David Wu.
Hello to the Packers Fan Podcast. This is David Wu from Seattle. And yes, I'm, of course, a Seahawks fan. But no, I'm not calling in to brag or pour any kind of salt in the wound. More or less, I'm calling in to express my appreciation and respect to the Packers and their fans. And I wanted to sincerely congratulate all of you on another great year. As a fan of the Seahawks, a longtime fan, yes, I'm on cloud nine, but this is, you have to understand it, this is rare air for us. Seahawks fans and Seattle sports fans in general, we're kind of more used to the agony of defeat and disappointment. So please understand that this is rare air. I can't speak for all the 12s because, as with any fan base, some are good, some are bad. Some are longtime fans like me, but some are bandwagoners. But as a longtime fan, I'm wise enough to know that, that this won't last forever. So at this point, I have to seize and appreciate the moment for now. But back to you, the Packers fans. I just want to say that your team will be back better than ever next year. I am a longtime follower of the Packers as an NFL fan, and I've had Aaron Rodgers and in the past Greg Jennings on my fantasy team, and this year I had Randall Cobb on my team. So I've been following your stats and your games for a long time. you do still have the most talented quarterback in the league, and I have the utmost respect for Aaron Rodgers. I'm still very much impressed with the heart that he showed these last few weeks. I mean, to me, it's inspiring. And you also have arguably the best wide receiver core in the league in Jordy Nelson and Randall Cobb, and one of the best coaches in the league, I must say. I also respect Mr. Bostic. He, I'm sure, is much maligned right now, but I respect him for being a stand-up man, taking the interviews after the game, and amidst perhaps the worst moment of his life. And again, just much respect. The Green Bay Packers are a classy organization, and so I just want to say blessings to you fans, and we'll touch base next year, I'm sure. You all take care.
The always classy David Wu from Seattle. Thank you so much for putting that together, sending that in. And on David Wu's Facebook page, if you are just following the Seahawks now, because they're playing against the hated team from New England in the Super Bowl, David has some very clever parody songs on his Facebook page. But David, always classy. Thanks again. And some great points that he brought up. And I thought this would kind of set the mood for a large chunk of this episode this week.
I think so. And the thing we all have to remember here is, yes, this was a difficult loss to stomach as a Green Bay fan, but anytime if you tell me that Green Bay is going to make the conference championship game and have a really, really good chance to go to the Super Bowl, it's still been a great season. I think if I was right, I'd have to go back and go into the archives, but I believe I said 11-5 at the start of the season, and Green Bay ended up being 12-4. They won the NFC North. They got a first round bye. They won a playoff game. I hope people don't just look at this one game and discount the whole season, because this really was a good season.
It really, really was. And we also got to beat that team from New England earlier in the season. And my son made a great point, because, you know, not Sunday night, because we all felt the punch in the gut and we're just like stunned and shocked, like what on earth is going on. But he made a great point that this is entertainment. Football is entertainment. We did get a full season of Packers entertainment watching the games. In fact, because we made it to the playoffs, we got some bonus entertainment. This most recent game, not all that entertaining. And I kind of chalked the whole thing. I mean, there were so many mistakes in the game, but everything seemed to go downhill as soon as Aaron Rodgers got injured and we had the loss in Buffalo. And I don't know. It's, you know, injuries happen, and when it happens to the best player in the NFL, things like this happen.
It's a part of the game, and even though it maybe wasn't Aaron Rodgers' best game as Green Bay quarterback, it was still a pretty solid game. And I think that he did enough to help Green Bay win. I know on Sunday, or I know that David talked about Brandon Bostic and the way that he stood up and accepted responsibility for what happened. Can't really say much more than that. He was willing to be accountable. He was willing to say he should have done things differently. Maybe that's the case, but you still have to admire the guy for standing up and saying what he did. The one thing I will say in this game, and I will make my one criticism during this particular monologue that I'm going to say here, and I said it on Facebook, and I'm going to stand by it until I can't talk anymore, but when you play sports, you cannot play the game not to lose.
The old prevent defense.
It only prevents victory. And not only that, but just a number of different events that happened. For example, when Burnett made the interception, he had 15 or 20 yards of additional space in front of him.
Right.
He intercepted the ball and he took a knee. Get the yardage you can and then take the knee. Then slide. Cover the points of the football. You're an NFL player. Cover the points of the football. Ball security above everything else. And then when you feel like you're about ready to get tackled, then get down. Then the play calling on the 3 and out right after that was just mind-blowing to me. Seattle had all 3 timeouts left. You can't just go into that type of offense and just try to run wide sweeps and not worry about gaining yardage, because as soon as that happens, the other team's going to call their timeouts on defense. And everybody who's listened to this show over the past 4 years knows that I am a Mike McCarthy supporter. I still remain a Mike McCarthy supporter because I don't let one game cloud my judgment over the entire body of work of anybody. And I don't care if it's the head coach or a quarterback or anybody else. But in this one particular game, I don't like saying it, but Mike McCarthy screwed up. He got too conservative. The team stopped attacking, and Seattle ended up making Green Bay pay for it. You have to keep attacking with 5 minutes left and the other team having all 3 timeouts. It had worked for 54 minutes. Keep doing it for the next 6 minutes and you're in the Super Bowl. It just didn't happen.
And to that particular point, I know that I'm certainly not a fan of the team from New England or Coach Belichick, but we could use a little more of the Belichick mixed in, because here's a guy who never takes the foot off the gas. He never takes his boot off the opponent's neck. I mean, in that game against the Colts, they were winning by 30 or more points. He still had the starters in. He was still trying to score. And although, there's still 12 days till the Super Bowl, so the Seahawks can regroup and Sherman can heal up a bit. But it looks to me like Bill Belichick wants his New England team to go in there and just be full force and just bang the Seahawks upside the head with a stick for 60 minutes. I don't want them to win, but I think they're going to try to do to Seattle what they did to the Broncos last year in the Super Bowl.
Wouldn't surprise me. Right now, you're right. New England is just, they're playing on a completely different level than they were a little bit earlier in the season, and they just get better every single game. Now, whether the footballs were intentionally deflated, which honestly I don't think made a real big difference in the game. People can talk about that, that much of a difference in the game. But and I'll go back to what I told a few people yesterday, was with Bill Belichick, I still remember the play on the Sunday, probably, I think it was Peyton's last year in Indianapolis. They were playing a Sunday night game, about 2.5 minutes left in the game, and New England went for it on 4th down and 2 from their own 28-yard line. Mm-hmm. And to this day, I still say that was a great call, even though New England didn't get the first down, because that was the ultimate in playing to win. And too many times I see coaches in all sports. It doesn't matter if it's basketball, it doesn't matter if it's football. You see teams that play great for the first 80 to 90% of the game. Then they try to slow things up. They try to just let time run out, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And like I was saying, even though I think that Bill Belichick in New England is going to try to just beat up Seattle the entire game, it is still 12 days away. Seattle can certainly regroup and get themselves ready. And, it very well could be a very close Super Bowl. Who knows? Maybe they'll even have a Super Bowl go into OT.
It has never happened. At some point it's going to happen.
Right. I never would have guessed yesterday's game or the other day's game was going to go into OT. So it's going to be interesting to see how things go. Of course, all the hype and everything. And anyways, let's check back in with the listener voicemail line at +1 904 469 7469. Hear from Packers fan Marcus.
Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Marcus from South Carolina, and tough loss. We played hard for about 3 quarters and couldn't quite seal the deal at the end. But we got to move past this. A loss is a loss, and we may look at it as, we had the game, but you don't have the game until there's 4 zeros on that clock. But we never had that game. You have to play all 4 quarters to beat the championship team, and we didn't do that. So, with that being said, we do have a lot to look forward to next year. I think we have improved throughout the year, and we'll carry this on the next year. We'll be a much better team. We will be a championship team. Like the year we lost to Arizona. Another gut-wrenching loss. And I don't think either one of them hurts more than the other, but offense will be better. We just got to get a red zone threat. And we need more help in our linebacker core to cover these running backs coming out of the backfield and tight ends. If we can get some help in the draft or in free agency, we can get it done next year, guys. And I'm hoping that we can get everybody back, but we'll see what happens. Either way, guys, keep your head up. Go Pack, go.
Marcus, go Pack, go indeed. Thank you so much for calling that in. And yeah, I actually do feel real confident that next season, with Aaron Rodgers being recovered, we will be an even stronger team and learn from a few mistakes this past season. For example, maybe we'll even start the season off strong instead of starting 1-2 and needing Aaron Rodgers to come out and telling us all to RELAX. But Marcus brought up some great points, right, Dallin?
He did. Obviously, any team needs to find the areas where they can improve. And there are some questions on this team. A few places where we know that there aren't going to be very many questions. Quarterback, running back. Definitely questions about whether Randall Cobb will still stick around. You know that in a league that is so dependent on the passing game, Randall's going to get some looks. You know that there'll be teams sizing him up to see, can he be the lead receiver on their teams, and more importantly, in that perspective, pay number one receiver type money. I do think that the front seven does need work. Obviously, the secondary was terrific. The 4 interceptions, can't say too much more about that. Obviously, we'd like to have that 2-point conversion moon ball back and just have it be knocked down. But
yes.
No, those kinds of things happen. And this is where the draft comes into play. And for Green Bay, they've had pretty good success drafting over the past few years. You look at Eddie Lacy, you look at HaHa Clinton-Dix. These are guys who have been drafted in the upper rounds and have made substantial contributions early in their careers. And that's what you want to see. The injury that Rodgers has, it's a muscle injury. In all likelihood, it's going to heal up and he'll be ready to go by the time we get to July for training camp. I mean, if Peyton Manning comes back, then Aaron should be able to come back. I think Manning's injury was a lot more serious than what Rodgers' injury was. So we'll see what happens. But there are some areas to address, and you don't know what's going to happen in the free agency market. That always is going to be a big factor for what a team is going to do in the draft and then getting ready for training camp. But there's so many variables that are still going to happen before that time.
Yeah, there's a long way to go, but it's time to start just getting ready. I mean, look at the teams who didn't make the playoffs that, fired their coach the next day at the end of the season. They are already hard at work. So the season never ends for a lot of the staff. But I'm sure we're going to be fine. The past few years, you're right. You named some of the people we got in the draft, and wow, we've done really, really well.
Hey, Wayne and Dallin, this is Hank Davis from TPEnetwork.com. As you know, I'm not necessarily a Packers fan, but I am a fan of the Packers Fan Podcast. So I wanted to send this in and give you guys my thoughts on this past weekend. I want to mention 3 things. First, everyone where I live was locked into the game. So you're talking me, my girlfriend, and her 12-year-old daughter. This is the first time it's ever happened where they were locked into a game. It was so much excitement in this game that it really captivated the audience, because that's never happened before, and I'm pretty sure it'll never happen again. Second, the only unforgivable play that Green Bay had, in my opinion, was the 2-point conversion. I can forgive not going for it on 4th down, but that 2-point conversion has to be one of the most improbable plays I've ever seen. It looked ridiculous. The ball was in the air so long it was like a punt. And how no defender on the field made a play on the ball and knocked it down or intercepted it is just beyond my scope of understanding. That's the only play that I can really look at and say, that should have never happened. the last item I want to mention is that Aaron Rodgers, even at 50%, is still better than the majority of quarterbacks in the NFL, in my opinion. Just jump on some statistical website that would have a listing of all the quarterback names. Moments before recording this is what I did. I said, who would I put on the road in Seattle in this high-pressure game instead of Aaron Rodgers, who is injured? And the list is very short still, and I'm pretty sure you guys would agree as well. That list is pretty short. Even a double amputee Aaron Rodgers is still better than half the NFL, in my opinion. But we're splitting hairs. Guys, I want to say you guys do a fantastic job on the podcast. Sorry that it has come to an end for your Packers, but being a Lions/Raiders fan, kind of sorry, but not sorry. All right. So until next season, guys, great job. And we'll see which one of our players on the Lions will step on one of your players on the Packers next season. Until then.
The future voice of NFL films, Mr. Hank Davis from the TPE Network. Thank you so much, Hank. Very kind of you. Very well stated. What Lion is going to step on a Packer next year? Hopefully none of them, but you never know.
Just look at one of the guys on the offensive or defensive line. You got a 1 in 9 chance.
Oh, man.
Sorry, Hank.
But he made a great point about that 2-point conversion. That ball did seem to float in the air forever. It was just in slow motion. I'm pulling out my hair in the horror of it all. And between that and just a lot of things that just went Seattle's way, the winning both coin tosses, and, marching down the field in overtime, scoring, winning. I actually started to get a weird feeling in my gut near the beginning of the game. Both those times we made it all the way down to the 1-yard line or the 5-yard line and decided to go for field goals. I was thinking, oh my, what are we doing?
I will say the first one, as hard as it was to see them kick the field goal, I probably would have done the same thing there because you want to get points. If you go for it on 4th down and for some reason you don't get it, huge momentum shift. I know it was a big enough momentum shift just to stop the Packers from getting the touchdown there, but you have to get points there. I'll stress this again. When I'm talking about Mike McCarthy's conservatism and the criticism I have of that, it's not about the first 54 minutes of the game. Maybe the second time the Packers had 4th and goal, maybe you go for it, but even there, you can't really fault taking the points on the road. Yes, you might have wanted to get those points and you think that it could bite you later on, but you're still getting points. The 2-point conversion pass, Hank's right. You have to knock that down. There's no benefit of trying to intercept it because you can't return an interception for points in the NFL. As soon as the defense intercepts it, it's a dead ball. It's not like in college where if you pick off a 2-point conversion pass or you return a fumble, you can get 2 points. You don't have that in the NFL. You just have to knock the ball down.
Right.
And
that's what they say.
Unfortunately there, just knock it down. And it didn't happen there. I would completely agree with Hank on that, where out of all the plays in the game, because even the onside kick, yes, you would like to think Jordy Nelson, a Pro Bowl wide receiver, is going to catch that, but you don't know that. The ball bounces funny ways in football sometimes.
That's true. There are no guarantees, and onside kicks are just total chaos on the field.
It's nuts. It's crazy, crazy stuff. So even there, he probably would have caught it, but you don't know that for sure, and we'll never know. But the 2-point conversion pass just had to be knocked down.
We also got some listener feedback by email and on Facebook. In fact, our listener Colin over in the UK wrote in and said, "Hey guys, never managed to ring in this week. Work kept him occupied. Thanks for all the pods this season. They've been great. Keep it up." Thanks for that, Colin. Mike Carlson was on local radio saying that the officials didn't have the best of games. Several big calls missed that affected the Pack more than the Hawks, and they didn't have much sympathy for Bostic and said that McCarthy had poor game management and paid the price for being too conservative, especially on the 4th and inches. Still heartbroken and crestfallen. Hashtag Go Pack Go. And Colin, thank you so much for posting that. And yeah, I mean, especially right after the game, that's when Bostic took the brunt of the frustration. But like, we talked about a little earlier and David Wu called in, it's just one of those things. And who knows, if we were in his position, we probably would have, hey, look, I can catch it. Oops. And there were so many things that went wrong that it wasn't just him. We also got an email from listener Brett who says, hey, Wayne and Dallin, first of all, I would like to say, despite the loss, what a great game of football it was. I thought the first half we played exceptionally well, and I still believe that early in the game, Coach McCarthy was right to go for the field goal on the 2 fourth down plays at the 1 yard line. And I wasn't trying to get to run Lacey to the left both times since it seemed to be Seattle's O-line's strongest point, but I could see the reasoning. And with still at least 45 minutes of the game to be played, I could see why you would want to get some sort of points on the board. I saw a lot on social media about the onside kick with people pushing the blame onto Bostic. Now, I have to say, at the time, I jumped on that bandwagon, but with reflection, would any other player not have done the same? And Bostic's assignment was to block, but in a crowd like that and the desperate need to get possession of the ball, if it came your way, you would try to catch it as well, regardless, right? And definitely, that's what I was saying just a minute ago, Brett. I think I would have done the same thing. He continues. Now, the biggest play I'm still trying to figure out has to be that interception by Morgan Burnett. Now, I like Burnett. Think he's a great player, but I still can't figure out why he slid on that play. He had a good 8 to 10 yards in front of him, maybe even could have gone to 12 to 15, spotting the ball further down the field and possibly pushing us into field goal range. And hey, who knows what would have happened? Maybe that last field goal by Mason would have sent us to Arizona instead of to OT, but that's another story for another day. And whilst on the subject, what are your thoughts on the overtime rules? I personally think it's unfair. I think both teams should get at least one possession of the ball regardless. I, for one, can't see how the current OT rules are deemed as being fair. Anyway, guys, thanks for the great podcast. Looking forward to listening again next season. But until then, go Pack Go, and many thanks, Brett from Birmingham in the UK. Awesome to have listeners around the world and a lot of great points. And I don't want to sound like I'm harping on the overtime rules just because the Packers lost. But I do agree with him that truly, why can't they be more like what the college overtime rules are?
I've said this for years, so I can confidently say that I still don't like the overtime rules in the NFL. They're better than they used to be. I never liked it where you could go 40 yards, kick a field goal, and the game's over. What I would do is if I were running the league, I would set the overtime where you start 1st and 10 on your own 35-yard line. And the reason I say your own 35-yard line is because to get a decent field goal, and let's say a field goal of 52 yards,
okay,
which not an easy field goal, but a field goal a lot of NFL kickers can make. That means you still have to go 30 yards. If you start at midfield, you only have to go 15 yards, which is basically a first down, in order to get into somewhat decent field goal range. And I would run it like the college game runs it, where each team gets 1st and 10. You move the ball until the other team can't get the ball. Yes, I know it takes the punting game out of overtime. I don't think that's a big deal. I know it takes the kickoff game out of overtime. I definitely don't think that's a big deal. But at least there, every team gets one touch of the football. And then if there's a pickoff return for a touchdown, a fumble return for a touchdown, the game's over at that point. Not a big deal because a defensive touchdown is going to end the game.
Right. Sounds good.
And then after the first overtime or the second overtime, just so that you just don't have teams kicking field goals, you can say, okay, after the second overtime or after the first overtime, you can't kick field goals anymore. You have to go for touchdowns.
Ooh, I like that, Dallin.
At least there, each team gets the ball, and it's still a pretty good. I would say it's still a pretty good opportunity.
Hey, I'm going to vote for you for the rules committee because that I haven't heard some of those different angles brought up. I like it. That's good stuff. Now, shortly after the game, because I wanted to get it out there while it was fresh in my mind, maybe I should have waited a day or two. I posted the question on Twitter and Facebook. What do you think the Packers should do to be even better next year? And some of the answers we heard from @Cheeseheadland on Twitter, whose wish list is a run-stuffing defensive tackle or nose tackle, a linebacker who can cover a tight end and a running back, and special teams that are special. Also heard from @PackBrewFan1, who believes we need to fire Slocum, and @MishyGirl says play the whole game, never assume it's over, and play aggressive. And we also got a lot of comments on Facebook as well, too conservative. Other people saying that it was all on the defensive coaching. Others blame McCarthy and the offensive coaching and things along those lines. And you talked earlier, Dallin, about some of the ways we can go in the draft. Do you believe Dom Capers might have to go? On Facebook, we had listeners who were standing up for Capers in this case, but other people that still believe Capers should go. What do you think?
I think it's going to be Capers' decision whether or not he goes.
Is his contract up right now?
I honestly don't know.
Oh, okay.
In my mind, I think for the last couple years, the defense has been suspect, and I know I've been one of the people saying that maybe a change is needed. I just don't think there's enough there to say he really needs to go. Now, if Capers decides it's time, then okay, that's one thing, but I just don't think you can force him out.
Okay. We did well enough that he should be able to, I guess, stay, it's just they need to tweak things a little bit, not be so conservative, and not have people just standing around on defense. Even my wife, I think it was in the third quarter when the Seahawks were starting to get momentum, and we had 2 or 3 players. I know there should be at least one in the middle of the field ready to run either way, but it looked like 2 or 3 guys were just standing there as if they were, out in the outfield playing baseball.
Yeah, that confused me a little bit as well.
So I'm sure that, everybody on the coaching staff, including the players, have heard much criticism, and I'm sure they'll take it to heart. They'll be watching this game tape. And, as far as being sick and punched in the gut, we're Packers fans, and we're going to be Packers fans probably for the rest of our lives. I know I will be, and you too, Dallin. But I know some of these Packers players, they know that they can't be Packers players forever. So they know they only have a finite number of years where they need to try to be, spot on and hope that, other teams, where we can jockey and get back into the playoffs and maybe even be the number 1 seed. Because I know you still have to play the game, but if we had won one more game and hosted the NFC Championship game, I think it could have been a totally different thing. And so the players, they've really got to feel punched in the gut because they know they're not going to be players forever.
And you just have to remember, too, the NFL is so difficult to make it to the Super Bowl. So many things have to go right. I mean, look at the Arizona Cardinals, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Until Carson Palmer got hurt, even until Drew Stanton got hurt, they were a legitimate Super Bowl contender. So many things have to go right. And I'm not saying the Packers were the best team this season, so for fans of other teams listening, please don't take this the wrong way, but the best team doesn't always get to the Super Bowl. Now, I think you could make a decent case this year. I think you make a pretty good case that the best team in each conference made it to the Super Bowl, but it doesn't always happen like that. This is only, I think, the 11th time where the number 1 seed in the AFC and the number 1 seed in the NFC have played in the Super Bowl.
I know there's been so many cases where it's been the 6th seed ran the tables and went all the way. The Packers have done things like that.
4 years ago, exactly. So there's just and when you're a player and you know that your time as an NFL player is limited, when you get that close and have that type of a loss, it will eat at you. There's no question about it.
Yeah. So, oh well, the Pro Bowl's coming this weekend. And then
Make me when that's done.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been a fun season. We've had a great time here on the Packers Fan Podcast. I always pick the Packers to win. I may even do that again next season on the show. But it's been great to watch the Packers. It is entertainment. It is sports. And it's unfortunate that it came to such a sudden, painful end. But the Packers will be back next year. And we're blessed that we're fans of a team like the Packers, where, a lot of teams, they're like, well, we're hoping we'll make the playoffs this year. And for us Packers fans, it's almost always Super Bowl or bust. It was still a successful season, but still. And even if Seattle wins or whether New England wins, still add all of their NFL titles together, they still have less than us. So there. Just
You're just
saying.
gonna rub that one in, right?
The numbers don't lie. 13 NFL titles. So anyways, Dallin, thank you so much for being on the show this year. Do you have any final thoughts before we head on out? And, maybe we'll be back around the draft time and we'll cover all that as we, see what's going on for the next version of the Packers.
Yeah, I think really pitchers and catchers report in a little less than a month, and the draft comes up in early May, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go. It's good stuff. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, listening to the show, whether it was just this week or all season long or for all 3 or 4 seasons we've been doing the show. It all goes together in a blur, and that's what we like because the Packers are fairly consistent. So, Dallin, thanks again. Do you have an early motivational send-off for the Packers that they can hang on to for next year?
Go, Pack, go. I'll never quit saying it.